Well, it's basically all gone wrong for Nebraska this season. We know the 3-6 start and the last play losses for the Huskers, but finally it all went right in Lincoln against Michigan State and knocking off the Spartans, who were then 8-0. The only way I can possibly sort through this is to bring in Brian Towle of Corn Nation. So, Brian, thanks so much for joining us. As always, good to hear from you. It's been a while. So, take us through the sequence. Down 12, how do the Huskers come back?
No, that's a great – this is interesting because, it's come to the point now where the one thing you can say, and this is really a testament to Mike Reilly, is that, they haven't played well. They haven't played, very good at times, hence last week versus a Purdue team that got shellacked by Illinois today. But they don't quit. They simply don't give up. It was evident in the Miami game. It was evident against BYU. Have things gone away from – yes, Nebraska's definitely, done not the greatest, fourth quarters. But they don't quit, and this is a big deal. They had momentum through the game. One of the best things was, the biggest play, probably arguably Nebraska said, was the first quarter when Michigan State had 4th and 1. I think at like the 42-43 went for it, and Nebraska stuffed them on the very opening drive for Michigan State, and that's a big deal. But down 12, fourth quarter, interesting enough, if the game goes and starts and ends with Tommy Armstrong, Michigan State makes it, Michigan State puts the score up, goes up, gets a 31, end of third quarter. And Nebraska actually scored to make it 31-26. They went 10 plays, 65 yards. Then all of a sudden, Dutch can't figure it out. 16 plays, 75-yard drive that went literally 9 minutes to go up. And, that's pretty much it. Nebraska's down 38-26. Then all of a sudden, got a little warm for Tommy Armstrong. Kept going. Big thing right after that 38-26, Kevin Cronin kicks one out of bounds. And then Andy Janovich gets it, and they started a great field position. Tommy Armstrong starts firing, 10-play drive. Big play for Armstrong was the final touchdown. Interesting play. Hadn't shown that before, where they went to Monty Cross, Andy Janovich, kind of in a old pro-style set, and they went, double lead blocker on the quarterback peeking around the corner. Went for 2. I didn't know if that was the greatest idea right then and there. But 38-33. They get, onside kick. Interesting play call in Michigan State with the runs, especially on the third down run where they went end around. I get it why they did it, because Nebraska's safety play was just god-awful today. Byerson Cockrell, Nathan Jerry trying to play Superman, and Connor Cook just absolutely just destroyed them time and time again. But Nebraska got the stop. Got the ball back with 55 seconds to go. 2 seam throws that Jordan Westerkamp covered. 60-something yards. He was down. Nebraska got really lucky. Kokung should have had the pick off of the Tariq Allen play right before that. A lot of people don't, tend to forget that. The guy had the interception, had the game in his hand, and dropped it. When he couldn't hold on to the ball. And then the next play, the force out called for Reilly. Do I think they got the call right? I'm going to be honest. No, I don't. But once he makes that decision, they can't just replay it and say, hey, you're right, we got it wrong. Whoops, sorry. Total judgment call. I think what helped Nebraska is on the replay, Jerry DiNardo from BTN made the point. If they're touching, which they were, down the line, they weren't going to give it back. And that's a great point by DiNardo. And, of course, then you have a kickoff where Drew Brown line drives it to a guy at the 35-yard line. And you're like, this is going to happen again. This is going to find a way to happen again. And it didn't. Connor Cook, kind of surprised they threw that last play, to be completely honest with you. I thought they'd run. I called the run. I said they're going to run inside. They're going to get on the hash. And there's going to be – and they threw in the one time all game Nebraska finally got pressured with 4 is right then and right there. And it finally happened. made Connor Cook throw a bad throw. And the Michigan guys kind of said it ahead of time. They said, watch his footwork. If it's bad footwork, he's going to throw it bad. Lord help us all. It finally happened, by gosh. And happy days are looking hip, hip, hooray.
Yeah, Michigan State was sitting at the 41, so they really needed some more yardage, and you typically can trust a guy like Connor Cook, who's won so many games and been in so many big spots, but it's easy to fault him. But I think once he got pressured, it was difficult for him to release the ball. He had to kind of double clutch and make a little space for him to try to get the ball out of bounds. But they did have the timeout, could have ran the ball. Who knows if they would have gained a yard or 8 yards or 10 yards or whatever it would have been, most likely 3 or 4 to give their kicker a shot at a long distance field goal. But it was sitting at like 59 yards at that point. So we know what the percentage chance on that one would have been. So here are my takeaways from seeing a good portion of the game, most of the fourth quarter, early in the game as well. Tommy Armstrong, when he's throwing the ball well, he throws a laser. It's a pretty pass. He looks great. The last drive, the 2 balls that he threw down the seam were beautiful. Shouldn't have gone for the 2-point conversion. There was still too much time left on the clock, too many scores in the bucket for both teams. Your defensive back play, as you mentioned, the safeties are bad. The pass defense is bad. And I got to ask you about Mike Reilly, your take on his coaching, the Husker community's take on his coaching, because I know a couple Nebraska fans, they don't like that he's a nice guy. They don't like his attachment to the defensive coordinator, that he doesn't have a proven track record as being an elite coach, and that he's just kind of a hanger-on. And they think Mike Reilly needs to go. And I tell him to hang on, that there was going to be a transition to his offense, and it was going to be kind of painful. So I'll shut up and let you take it from there.
One thing to say about Armstrong, he did miss last week's game. He had a foot injury on his left foot and an ankle injury on his right. So, worst case scenario, he's going to throw off his back foot at times. But you saw his running tonight. He ran the ball pretty well. If I remember right, he had like 7 carries, 25 yards. I mean, not terrible. That includes sacks. But Nebraska did what they needed to do on the run. Finally, for the first time all year, Nebraska's run-pass split was more run than pass. I think it was like 37-32. Your comment about Reilly, and this is what I'll say about it, and I tend to think that it hurts him. What hurts Mike Reilly at Nebraska is he's used to being the underdog. He's used to having the program that's not very good. He's used to being the dog at home. And for the most part, that's hurt him. That's hurt him a lot this year, because he has a team with better players than he ever had at Oregon State. You could say the talent's not great in Nebraska for what it should be in Nebraska, but for what he's had compared to what he's had at Oregon State, the talent's there. Now, that all being said, Mike Reilly's a guy who coaches teams to be dogs and win. And while it doesn't really work, hasn't worked all year at Nebraska, it was the perfect time they needed it for tonight. Okay, he knew how to keep the game close. He knew how to come back from 11 points down in the fourth, at the beginning of the fourth quarter. He knew how to come back down from 12 with 5.5 to go in the game. He knows how to coach a dog to win. Pretty obvious tonight, and I say this because next week they're going to go to Rutgers, and they're going to be a favorite against Rutgers. And Mike Reilly's going to coach that team like a dog to Rutgers. They're an underdog to Rutgers, which, great coaches find a way to get it done both ways. Not saying Mike Reilly's not a good coach at all by any means. Is it being a little bumpy? Yeah, the transition is bumpy, especially defensively. A couple guys probably need to go on the defensive coaching side. There needs to be a youth infusion, especially on defense, especially in the secondary. Linebacker play is 10 times better than it was last year, and that's being said with guys that are hurt all year, walk-ons playing. Nebraska has no pass rushers. They have a great run defense. They have no pass rushing whatsoever, and that was evident tonight when Cook would just pick anybody apart. But what happened tonight was the offense hadn't quit, and the offense is pretty good under Mike Reilly. Armstrong can't make the throws that they want completely all the time, and I think that's obvious. But in a first-year program with a guy that was more a zone read guy to where, it's more West Coast, quote-unquote, pro style, that, Armstrong he's thrown for 300 yards 6 games, I remember, out of 9 that he's played this year, and that's pretty good. Is that what he's being asked to do? Yeah. Could they run the ball a little more? Yes. They ran the ball a little more tonight. They got 190 yards on the line with Sheik Calhoun on it, and I think that's pretty good. Nebraska tried to – most of those yards were in between the tackles. I mean, let's face it, Michigan State is probably one of the 2 teams in the Big Ten, along with Ohio State, that's just as fast at the edge as Nebraska is on offense. Nebraska is built for speed on offense around the edge. That's what Tim Beck built, and that's what Danny Langsdorff and Mike Reilly inherited. So the one thing Nebraska did was like, you know what, we're just going to line up and we're going to go, and that's what they did. Amani Cross got 100 yards in a backup role because Newby was hurt a little bit. But again, back to the point, Mike Reilly knows how to coach an underdog to win. Did it at Oregon State. He did it tonight. The one thing Mike Reilly's got to get better at, and I think he realizes it, but I think he realizes how to do it, is he's got to learn how to be the front runner, how to be the big program. That's something that Nebraska's, he's going to have to learn how to do better if he's going to be something for the Big Red in a couple years down the road. He's not going to get fired. He's probably going to have to clean a little gut out a little bit of the house, but he's not going to get fired after this year, especially after a win like today.
Well, I really wanted to see undefeated Ohio State and Michigan State teams play in a couple weeks. But that said, if the Spartans were going to lose, I was glad to see Nebraska knock them off, considering all the incredibly excruciating losses the Huskers have racked up this year. So it's 4-6. They lost 6 games on the last play, as we all know, or at least 5 of those games on the last play, the Purdue game notwithstanding. So I don't think anyone's going to try to convince anyone that this is an 8-2 or 9-1 team. But as you mentioned, much more talented, and we saw it against Minnesota, and we saw it again today that this Nebraska team could be much better. And it'll be interesting to see going into the offseason and forward into 2016 what Reilly's able to do with this program.
Yeah, the one thing I would say about Michigan State, this is probably one of Connor Cook's worst days. He was still 23-37 for 335 and 4 touchdowns. If I remember right now, he has the Michigan State school record for touchdown passes.
Yes, he does.
I think he went by, what's his name, Cousins. Did we go by Cousins tonight?
I don't know who he passed tonight. It would probably be a modern day quarterback, Kirk Cousins, maybe Drew Stanton, one of those guys.
And the one thing I would say about Michigan State is, the Burbridge kid went huge tonight, 10 for 164, and they actually had a decent night catching the ball. But if you notice, running the ball, the only guy that got anything was Gerald Holmes. He had 22 carries for 117. 43 of it was on that one first play in the first set, Michigan State's first possession. And besides that, they didn't even get the 30 yards with anybody else. Really interesting to me to see how Michigan State kind of, I wouldn't say they played to lose, but you kind of wonder where that killer instinct went at parts of times of the game. Like, they didn't get really conservative, but at the same time, it seemed like that they didn't really ride their horses very well. And, it's going to be interesting to see how they do versus Ohio State, because if they play like this defensively, especially, it's not going to be very good for them.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. It's not a typical Mark D'Antonio team. He knows where his strengths lie, and it's not in the run game, and it's not at cornerback. He doesn't have 2 lockdown corners. He doesn't have the typical Spartan defense, and especially a cornerback, and he's been spreading the ball out, and it's Connor Cook basically shoulders the load on offense. So, all right, so it's a trip to Rutgers, and you go to Iowa, which could be very interesting with a bowl bid on the line for Nebraska and maybe an undefeated regular season for the Hawkeyes coming up in a couple weeks.
Yeah, the Rutgers next week in Jersey at High Point. If I remember right, Carew didn't play today. Not sure about him playing. Leon Carew not playing against Nebraska next week would be big. Finally, a week off. Nebraska gets a week off in week 12 of the season. A little bit of health. We'll get a little healthier. DPE's out. Pierce Adele's out for the year, obviously. Michael Rose-Ivy needs to get healthier. A couple other guys on offense need to get healthier. See what happened with Lester Camp this week. And then finally they have Iowa in Lincoln the day after Thanksgiving. It's going to be an early kick, 11 a.m., Black Friday. I'm going to see, 5-7 probably gets Nebraska to a bowl this year just because of how many bowl games there are. People don't like it. And, it's not like I know some fans that think it's an embarrassing thing, but at the same time, this team needs 15 more practices. This team needs more repetitions. It definitely they need that, because the more they have under Mike Reilly and Danny Langsdorff or Mark Banker, the better off they're going to be, regardless of who's there or not. It's just going to fact the matter that Nebraska needs more time to gel. So definitely win one of those last two games, and you're probably bowling. So.
All right, Brian Towle from Corn Nation. Hey, Brian, thanks for staying up late with us and knocking out the recap. Appreciate it.
You got it, my man.